Davao City has been placed under general community quarantine as COVID-19 cases in the area continue to rise. To give us the latest, we have Jem Abansenya reporting live from Davao City. Jem, what would this mean for Davaoenos?
Robbie, effective today, Davao City reverts back to general community quarantine status as recommended by the National Interagency Task Force for COVID-19. With this, Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte announced the guidelines, including the new curfew policy. More stringent checkpoints resulted in heavy traffic in different areas in Davao City since Monday. The Davao City local government has imposed stricter quarantine policies such as the use of food and medicine pass. Non-essential travels are also restricted. Police personnel inspect those passing by control points, checking their FM pass or essential travel documents. Some malls and grocery stores also implement the no FM pass, no entry policy. That's why some businesses are struggling.
Sa ngayon, di pa. Pero sa susunod, pag bumabalik yung GCQ, yun, mahirap na. Gagapang na tayo dyan.
Just this morning, Malacanang announced that Davao City will be under GCQ beginning today. Mayor Sara Duterte clarified that no establishments will be closed under the new quarantine classification. However, some establishments such as beauty salons and spas will have to reduce capacity to 70%. Churches will have to cut capacity to 30%. Duterte also warned Davaoenos that the GCQ status might be extended until December.
It's until November 30. But bago mahuman ang bulan sa November, May, ang ato ang IATF, nagapagawas naman na sila og classification sa community quarantine. So we can expect na before mag-end ang November, ihatag nila ang community quarantine classification nato for December. Iandam nato ato ang kaugalingon nato na we will still be under a GCQ community quarantine classification for the month of December.
The local chief executive also denied the IATF's claims that the city allows home quarantine resulted in more local transmissions.
I never said na okay lang ang home quarantine para sa mga positive cases. So I'm sorry, I did not speak up and karon lang ko nitingog, karon late na ko nitingog na wala ta nag-home quarantine sa mga positive cases.
Curfew hours in the city will now be from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m., which was previously set from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. Robbie, as of November 19, Davao City has a total of 5,297 COVID-19 cases, of which 1,744 are still active. Robbie?
Maraming salamat, Jem Abansenya, reporting live from Davao. Now, Baguio City seems to be headed in the opposite direction. A downtrend in cases has been monitored in the city of Pines following a spike in infections over the last few weeks. In an interview with Radyo 5, Mayor Benjamin Magalong attributed the previous rise in cases to transmission among hospital staff. That on top of Baguio's isolation facilities reaching 90% capacity last week. The city has since put up an additional isolation facilities. In today's Laging Handa briefing, Magalong, who sits as contact tracing czar, verified the W.H.O.'s claim that the country's contact tracing efficiency remains weak, well below the ideal 1-to-37 ratio.
If you look at the contact trace efficiency ratio nationwide, we're still pegged at 1:7. And one of the major factors contributory factors kung bakit nangyayari dyan is dahil kasi walang encoding system na maayos. Yung ibang local government, mano-mano pa rin. So we're now coming up with a uniform data collection tool.
Meanwhile, American vaccine developers Pfizer and Moderna may apply for emergency use authorization in the Philippines as early as the first quarter of 2021. That is, if the Food and Drug Administration is granted the power to issue such permits. FDA Director Eric Domingo says the developers are expected to seek EUA in the U.S. next month, and then they will likely seek the same in other countries by early next year. He said an EUA speeds up the approval of the vaccine to 21 days or no more than a month. That normally takes 6 months. But the Health Department said an EUA does not guarantee a vaccine a slot in the local market.
Na ito pong mga bakuna in the advanced stages in the market ay meron pong mga pagkakaiba-iba. Pag natapos lahat yan at nabigyan ng go signal, that's the time that we can procure.
On the other hand, once those shots are available, 66% of adult Filipinos are willing to get inoculated. That's according to the latest SWS survey. Of that number, 32% have no reservations, 34% have some doubts, 31% refuse inoculation. The results are in stark contrast to a 2019 SWS survey where 62% of respondents did not want Dengvaxia to be sold in the Philippines. We'll go for a quick break. When the big story returns, the country might have to import rice in the first part of 2021. This, as the recent typhoons is expected to affect supply. And oral arguments against the controversial Anti-Terror Act will finally be heard come January 2021. The details coming up. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Although rice supply remains sufficient for the remaining days of 2020, damage from recent typhoons have dragged the country's self-sufficiency level, causing the Department of Agriculture to consider bringing in more rice imports next year. Local farmers are up in arms with the idea, Shaila Francisco explains.
The country lost 8 days' worth of rice supply to the consecutive typhoons in the past month. Of the 12.3 billion peso damage to agriculture sector, close to 40% are from rice alone. With this, the Agriculture Department admits that the country's self-sufficiency level may lower to 90%, 3% short of its original target. The DA says the country may need to import more rice in 2021 as a solution.
Nakita ninyo yung severe destruction. So for this year, as I've said, we have more than enough inventory. But this is also a consideration for your next year's projection.
For now, rice supply is seen to last 85 to 88 days. DAR says the first half of the imports will arrive by January or February next year. As early as now, farmer groups are up against the plan. Nakilusang magbubukid ng Pilipinas says the DA should not use the typhoons as an excuse to pursue the policy. The focus, according to the group, should be on helping local farmers get back on their feet as soon as possible to increase supply. Both farmers and fishers group are now demanding immediate action from the government.
Kaya po. Marami na po akong nakita at naikutan kahit po sa Central Luzon, sa Northern Luzon at Kabikulan, humupa na po yung tubig. Kaya po kagyat na kagyat ang kailangan. Una po, ulitin ko, binhi agricultural production subsidy. Kailangan po ay i-rehabilitate yung mga malalawak na sakahin. Hindi po ang solusyon ay importasyon.
Ang kailangan talaga dito yung suporta, no? Para matiyak natin na magiging maganda at maayos yung produksyon natin, para matiyak natin na masuportahan yung kakulangan o yung naging epekto nitong bagyong nagdaan doon sa ating pagkain.
The DA explains that typhoon-hit areas may only be able to start planting again by mid-December.
Kailangan natin masyadong isugal kasi we need to be guided by the pag-asa forecast. Kung sabihin nila wala ng bagyo, pwede nang mag-land preparation agad.
The DA also assures farmers that the distribution of aid is underway. Aside from seeds and fertilizers, farmers in typhoon-hit provinces will be given an indemnity worth 10,000 to 15,000 pesos as long as they are enrolled in the registry system for basic sectors in agriculture. Excess tariff worth 6 billion pesos from the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund will also be given to 1.1 million rice farmers tilling 1 hectare and below. 5,000 peso worth of cash and food assistance, meanwhile, will be given to both rice and non-rice farmers under the Bayanihan 2. Shaila Francisco, WR1 News.
In Marikina, the shoe industry has taken some heavy pounding after the massive flooding damaged merchandise. According to the Marikina Small and Micro Footwear Makers Association, the calamity heavily affected their business, with some still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. Marikina City Mayor Marcy Teodoro assured shoemakers that the Trade Department will provide financial assistance to help them bounce back. In an interview with the One News, the chiefs, Teodoro also said the citywide cleanup may take up to 45 days.
Wash out lahat. Dahil nga ang flooding is as high as second story or second floor of houses. Kaya daigang undoy dahil mas mataas pa to dun sa water level ng undoy. Ang maganda lang, yung community ngayon nagpa-participate, kumikilos, naglilinis ng kanilang sariling lugar.
In Barangay Pansol, Calamba, Laguna, some parts of the hot spring capital are still submerged in waist-deep flood waters. Around 400 hot spring resorts had to stop operations because of the flood. Local officials say the current situation might last until Christmas or even beyond.
Dahil sa napondong tubig galing sa Laguna Lake, kasi ilang sunod-sunod pong bagyo ang dumating dito po sa atin, yung naging epekto po nitong bagyong si Rolly ay talagang mas malakas po yung volume ng.
In the aftermath of back-to-back typhoons, several groups and individuals extended a helping hand to disaster-hit areas, proving that Kapit Bisig mentality is still alive. Their heartwarming effort in Pat Mangunes' story.
Typhoons, some just days apart, have recently devastated the country, especially Luzon. Many Filipinos tapped into the Bayanihan spirit to help those who were heavily battered. Ana Salano took to social media her call for donations of empty bottles. Why, you ask? Her group, Liwanag at Pag-asa and Feed Hungry Minds, turns these jars and bottles into improvised lamps and lanterns. They have collected more than 1,000 pieces. These will all be lit just by using cooking oil and salt, giving a sustainable source of light for typhoon-hit households in Bicol. To keep typhoon victims warm on cold nights, garments producers in Taytay, Rizal provided ready-to-wear clothes and sewn blankets for evacuees. Retazos were also sewn into face masks. The group said this is their way of giving back to other towns and provinces that helped make Taytay the garment capital of the country. Meanwhile, Chef Jam Melchor's Slow Food Youth Network Philippines has been feeding hundreds of evacuees from Rizal and Marikina 3 meals a day since the onslaught of Typhoon Ulysses. Chef Jam appealed to the public to donate hot meals instead of canned goods and noodles. He said that apart from being a healthier option, hot meals help farmers sell more produce.
Madami kasi nung mga tao na nasa evacuation centers at the moment doon sa Marikina. So wala silang mga dalang kagamitan para makapagluto. Kaya naman ini-encourage ko yung mga tao na magdala or magbigay ng mga bagong lutong pagkain.
In Caloocan, Professor Rowe sells these giant hamburgers with 7-inch buns to raise funds for students and colleagues affected by the Cagayan floods.
Na-touch po ako dun sa mga kwento, lalo na sa mga estudyante ko na dun sa Cagayan. Isabela, malapit sila sa Cagayan River at saka mga co-professor ko na halos nasa second floor na daw naabot. Yung mga hayop daw at saka mga gamit nila halos nalulog talaga, walang-wala po sila.
Meanwhile, doctors on boats from the Philippine Medical Association provided medical and relief missions in Cagayan. They provided free online and face-to-face medical consultations and psychosocial services in calamity-affected areas. The Alagang Kapatid Foundation also provided relief goods and face masks to residents in the town of Santo Tomas in Isabela. Residents here lost their main livelihood after the floods denuded their farmlands. William Vinali said, any form of help comes a long way.
Itong binigay nito, magpapasalamat ako at may nakatulong sa akin. Dalawang araw ako doon sa bubong. Pero may kapitbahay ako pero hindi ko marunong maglangoy. Mabuti at may yung dagi, ginalot ko sa kabalyete. Hindi, sa bahay. Hanggang madaling araw, tumaas yung tubig. Lahat ng gamit ko basa, pati ako.
The Baguio City government also helped Cagayan in a fun way. Remember the famous swan boats in Baguio City's Burnham Lake? Well, they were brought to Amulong, Cagayan to aid in transporting residents. It also served as recreation for children who were traumatized by the flooding incident. For News 5, Patricia Mangune. We are One News.
And these are the other big stories today. The University of the Philippines has denounced President Rodrigo Duterte's threat to defund it for supposedly being a recruitment hub for communists. In a statement, UP Diliman Chancellor Fidel Nemenzo said UP is a safe haven for civilized and intelligent discourse, but it has, quote, no place for intolerance, bigotry, and red tagging. Nemenzo pointed out that UP has bred more scientists, artists, doctors, lawyers, diplomats, and civil servants than communists. The Senate has already approved the UP system's 19.6 billion peso proposed budget. And this from the Philippine Star. The BPO sector is poised for its first revenue decline in 11 years or since the end of the global financial crisis. The sector's umbrella group IBPAP expects the industry to generate $26.2 billion this year, 0.5% down from last year's revenue. Jobs creation would likewise get stalled at 1.3 million full-time employees. That is below last year's projection of up to 1.37 million. The BPO sector's growth is seen to continue slowing down over the next 2 years. The logo of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is getting a facelift after 10 years. From white strokes, the BSP's Philippine Eagle is now rendered completely in gold. The TriStar has been retained but rearranged, while the circular blue logo now has a deeper shade. BSP Governor Benjamin Diokno said the use of the new logo will be done in phases, details of which will be announced in January. And the Supreme Court has set oral arguments on petitions against the controversial Anti-Terror Act for January 19, 2021. This according to an advisory received by one of the 37 petitioners who questioned the constitutionality of the measure. A preliminary conference is scheduled next week for November 26. We'll pause for another break. When we return, the WHO finds out that there is low certainty that Remdesivir will help improve the condition of hospitalized COVID-19 patients. And almost everyone is going online as a result of the pandemic, including Santa Claus. Give him a FaceTime to know if you've been naughty or nice. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. With the pandemic pushing the country's digital economy to unprecedented levels comes a spike in online fraud. Beauty bankers aren't taking chances. They just launched an online platform to mitigate internet scams. How does that work? Gerard de la Peña explains.
The pandemic has fueled the rise of online commerce, as many, if not all, consumers are forced to stay indoors to contain the spread of COVID-19. The domestic digital economy is even projected to grow by 6% this year to $7.5 billion and to $28 billion by 2025, according to the latest Economy Southeast Asia report. But the rise of digital transactions became a burden for others, especially bank workers, customers, and even regulators, as online scams are also on the rise. One victim is Jaren, who received a text message from his bank informing him of an attempt to use his card for gaming credits. This is the second time this has happened to Jaren. He is now trying to outsmart scammers.
I always call customer service to check if meron silang mga facility to track, no? Kasi like for example, may mga sign up dyan na kapag ganitong amount yung transaction, it should notify you via email and text. And then I subscribe to that.
Bong, another online bank user, said his card had been used many times for online shopping by an unknown user. Apart from the burden of having to report the attempt to his bank, he has to bear the hassle of having his card changed.
It took long, but at least naibalik siya sa akin. Yun naman yung importante. But then yung worry ko din kasi during that time was the fact na it was a lockdown, and then savings ko kasi siya.
With growing customer complaints, banks have joined forces to educate the public on how to avoid online scams. Various banks have launched a platform called scamproof.ph. This provides a venue for the public to share online fraud experiences. It helps other clients to avoid being prey to similar schemes. It also comes with tips on securing online bank accounts.
During the pandemic alone, the fraud cases actually doubled, really alarming for us. And which is something that we hope that with all the efforts of everybody, we can bring that statistic down.
The Bangko Sentral maintains digital commerce will continue to be a part of the new normal. BSP Governor Ben Jocno has made it his goal. No less than 50% of transactions by value or volume should be done digitally by 2023. Until then, consumers just have to stay vigilant and well-informed to avoid being victims of internet scams. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, We Are One News.
A student from Mapua University has bagged the first James Dyson Global Sustainability Award for converting rotting fruits and vegetables into solar panels. The details in Benjo Gutierrez's report.
One man's trash is another man's treasure, especially to a 27-year-old Carvey Maige. Before his family's crops went bad, he found a way to utilize them, attaching them in panels to windows and walls. The resulting product absorbs ultraviolet lights from the sun and converts it into renewable energy.
Sayang, hindi natin nakukuha yung enerhiyang ito gamit yung mga conventional na solar panel, and yan yung naisolusyonan ng aking inbensyon.
Carvey dubbed his invention Aureus, inspired by the science behind auroras and polar lights. Unlike solar panels, Aureus works even without direct exposure to sunlight. His invention could substitute regular building windows for an instant solar energy farm.
Farmers would not need to worry of having their crops devastated and eventually incurring financial losses. This is a device that would create a safety net for you, that we will back up you in case something happens.
This invention is now an award-winning idea. He was selected as a recipient of the James Dyson Awards, an international competition for the next generation engineers. But this award-winning idea was born out of a bumpy road. Staying in college for a decade, he submitted an entry years ago and got many rejections since then. But this time, he was able to beat over 1,800 other countries outside the Philippines. With Aureus, search and rescue operations would no longer be literally groping in the dark, akin to the Cagayan situation after Typhoon Ulysses.
One of the worst things that happened during the recent typhoon is that there's no electricity, so there is difficulty in the search and rescue operations.
Carvey said the usage of renewable energy would be a good chip-in on climate change.
It would allow us to combat what causes these very strong typhoons, and that is climate change.
For now, Carvey is setting his sight on further improving his invention after receiving 300,000 pounds or around 1.9 million pesos for the James Dyson Awards.
Red Broadband under Radius Telecoms is the newest fiber broadband and pay TV service under the MVP Group, but no, it's not competing with PLDT. Radius Telecoms President and CEO Ezequiel Delgado says Red Broadband complements PLDT services as more users want multiple IPs. He also said that Red's launch had nothing to do with the bid withdrawal to purchase Sky Cable. Delgado says the tie-up between Radius Telecoms and Signal TV had been in the works since 2019. Red Broadband operates within the Meralco franchise areas as it uses its fiber optic lines in Metro Manila, parts of Bulacan, and Calabarzon. They have yet to announce when the services will become available.
There's always room if your intent is to improve the current, what's currently happening in the market. And we believe that Red Broadband, is that internet service that will revolutionize the way internet is being experienced by people here in the Philippines.
A WHO panel is warning against the use of Remdesivir for hospitalized COVID-19 patients. The WHO says they found lack of evidence that Remdesivir improves significant factors for patients such as reduced mortality rate, the need for machine ventilation, and time towards clinical improvement. Remdesivir initially grabbed worldwide attention as a potentially effective treatment for COVID-19. This is another setback for U.S. biopharmaceutical firm Gilead, which cut its 2020 revenue forecast. They cited lower than expected demand and difficulty in predicting sales of Remdesivir. The antiviral medication, which was one of the drugs used to treat U.S. President Donald Trump for COVID-19, is one of only 2 medicines currently authorized to treat COVID-19 patients worldwide. Fresh off the ASEAN Summit last week, several world leaders, including President Rodrigo Duterte, will now be attending the APEC Summit taking place in Malaysia. This is the first time the 21-member APEC meeting will be held online, again as a result of the pandemic, which is expected to be the forum's top agenda. This year's summit carries the theme, Optimizing Human Potential Towards a Resilient Future of Shared Prosperity. President Duterte will be in attendance. He will be joined by other world leaders, some of whom, like New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, and Chinese President Xi Jinping, have already spoken in separate dialogues with CEOs. Outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump is also expected to speak this evening, just 2 weeks after he lost his re-election bid for a second term. A possible Trump and Xi Jinping meeting, albeit virtually, is expected to bring to the fore once again talks on lingering trade issues. Xi has already voiced unilateral and protectionist approaches ahead of the meet, similar to what the U.S. did when it launched a multi-billion-dollar trade war against China. The APEC Summit in 2018 ended with the 2 countries failing to reach any consensus, with differences in views on trade and investment. Other Asia-Pacific leaders hope for a more multilateral U.S. under President-elect Joe Biden. This follows the signing of the RCEP deal, which is considered to be the biggest regional free trade pact to date. Apart from addressing COVID-19 challenges, disputes in the South China Sea could likely come up. President Duterte invoked the Philippines' arbitral win over China during the UN General Assembly in September. With holiday celebrations not spared from the pandemic, Santa Claus is going virtual, and he's asking kids in his nice list what they want for Christmas. Archival tech company Storyfile has created an AI Santa Claus for children to talk to online. Kids and kids at heart can meet Santa through AskSanta.com and interact with him virtually. Storyfile tested the app on children before it launched, which gave a seamless interaction with kids, so much so that kids thought they were really on FaceTime with good old Saint Nick. And of course, the #1 question so far, am I on the naughty or nice list? The website is now up until New Year's Eve. It is free to access. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again on Monday at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Watch out for the Chiefs with our guest this evening, Vice President Lenny Robredo. Good evening.